So, hi, Lisseth. Thank you so much for coming. I can we start by you just introducing yourself, any titles that you have, and just tell us what you do.
Yes, well, my name is Lisseth London. I am a international psychologist doctoral student. My background is in social work, with I have a with an emphasis in trauma services. I worked mostly with immigration and refugees, just a migrant worker and family. Um, in the trafficking population. So a lot of my experience comes from that angle in terms of my expertise. I am originally from Panama, so my primary language is Spanish. So I arrived to the States 95. I was 9 years old. And so a lot of my social service approach to things with my clients have been because of what I saw assimilating to the U.S. culture. So I would say that I'm a social worker slash international psychologist and a humanitarian. So I would say that's the best way to come at it.
Okay. So, have you ever worked with the homeless population, just in itself?
I have. I worked for the home with the homeless population when I lived in Minnesota, with the Salvation Army. Hopefully I can say the name of the company, but yes, Salvation Army, Harbor Lights. And during that time, it was when Chicago was having their surge with individuals not being able to receive general assistance. So a lot of the individuals from Chicago, Louisiana, um, Arizona, and Mississippi, we had a lot migrate to the Minnesota system. So we worked with the male population in the homeless shelter from 16 to the oldest client that I had was 88, and he lived in the shelter for 20 years. And everybody helped him get a housing, support, all the resources, but he refused to leave the shelter. That was his home. So, and he just always smiled. He knew that everybody in the neighborhood, the shelter is on the outskirts of the downtown Minneapolis. So every morning he will leave, have his little breakfast, and just walk downtown the same route every day. And so, everybody just knew he was like the grandpa of the shelter. So I work with that population for about 2 years, providing services, housing services, but also trauma services.
Okay, I have a lot of questions now.
Yeah.
But first, I've been asking everybody who's come on our calls to define poverty because just working with the homeless population and just talking to people in conversation, I recognize that everybody has a different perspective of poverty, and most of the time it's because of how they grew up. And so, can you define poverty or describe what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of poverty?
So my definition of poverty is very different, only because my foundation is in what I saw growing up in my own country. What is considered poverty in America is normal in my home. So I think I learned what poverty was in my grad school, like when I was in grad school. I didn't understand that it was not normal to, like, oh, you eat bread and an egg, or oh, you don't have, like, oh, you eat like pasta every day for because that's all you had. Like, I didn't understand that that was part of what the definition of poverty, a low income family. I did not know. I just thought this was normal, um so poverty for me is, I don't define it by what you don't have, but what you make of it with your family. So I think that's how I see poverty.
Mhm.
The ability to make that memory of and that perseverance of it all with your family. So I that's how I define my poverty in my mind. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
It does, yeah. So so you talked about like eating like the same thing like every day. Do you think you didn't think that that was poverty simply because that's what was happening in your home, or because that's literally what you saw even outside of your home all around you? Like that was your town's norm.
That was my town's norm. I mean, our neighbors, our families, our extended families, you know, it was, if it wasn't like noodles and this, it was rice and beans or rice and egg, or you know, it was always the same, like, but it was the same meal constantly, you know. Um we, you know, going to Maranatha's centers to get like food boxes, like walking there and getting food boxes that will last you for a whole month, you know. Having getting the vouchers from the churches so that you can go and purchase milk or cheese. Yeah, like those things to me was normal because I saw everybody was doing the same thing, you know. I didn't see that as a, this is what defines you as or considered to be low income poverty level. And even with that, the laughter wasn't absent.
Mm-hmm.
The parties wasn't absent. The communication or the community, I'm sorry, that wasn't absent. Like it still felt as if everything was okay. So that's why I couldn't understand, even when I was growing up, like, what do you mean? Oh, I was in poverty? Like, oh, we didn't have this? Oh, I didn't know because we didn't, you know.
Do you remember like the first time where you had that wow moment? Like what do you mean I've been living in poverty? Do you remember like that specific moment, or like a general time around that moment where you there was like one specific thing that made your brain click? Like this isn't necessarily normal out here.
I ended up working for a community center in my undergrad.
Okay.
And, but even then, it didn't click. Because I was working with a community with refugees and, undocumented, like migrant individuals. So for me, it was normal. It didn't really click until I literally got to a grad school. And I was in a place where I didn't have the things that I was used to at this point, you know? Mm-hmm. And I had to revert back to where I was, which is rice and beans. Yeah. And it clicked to me like, oh, wow, that's what poverty was. Like, that's what it was to me. So it clicked then, which was interesting. Even after working with the community center or working with the churches, like it didn't faze me. Like I didn't see it. But until I had to, like, as an adult, experience it and make the decision, like, oh, I don't have all of this. I have to support myself by making sure I had this. Oh, I don't have enough money to feed myself for the next week or 2 weeks until I get paid. Okay, this is what I have to do to survive. And then that clicked.
So it wasn't until you had to take care of yourself.
I did, until I had to take care of myself.
Very interesting that you never just saw it, you know, outside of your normal day-to-day routine. That's very interesting. Well, let's dig it. First of all, I forgot you had a background in social work, so I just feel like I'm very excited right now. But I want to really get into this shelter that you worked at. So you worked in Minnesota, and as soon as you said Minnesota, I'm thinking about how the difference is between like poverty here in California and poverty there in Minnesota. You know, just the homeless population, how different that probably is. I've never been to Minnesota. I know nothing about it. So would you say that they have a large homeless population? Like, is it like if you're out here in LA riding down the street, you know, you see the homeless individuals out on the street? Is it like that?
Yeah, you see it like that mostly in the city, in downtown area. Some used to go to the uptown area, which was like maybe a 5 to 10 minute bus ride. It wasn't that far, but mostly is in the Minneapolis area because that's where their shelter was, and also that's where the basketball center, and the football center. So a lot of them used to get hired by these facilities to clean up, you know. So they will pay them a certain amount for the day just to be able to do whatever, or they were, because the Minneapolis was so connected with the Harbor Lights, they were able to so make a deal so whatever food or whatever was left over, a lot of people could take it. So yeah, it was just, and that's what drove a lot of people from a lot of different states to come to Minnesota, because one, we provided general assistance, so everybody every month received about $230 to $250, and that will last them for a month. Of course, some of them went to the shelter, so the shelter took a stipend out of it if they were staying there. If individuals were getting Social Security, they will get a stipend from that to basically provide them with whatever extra necessity that they needed. Like the 88-year-old man that I was talking to you about, he was there for so long that his checks were coming to the center. And so if he needed to like go to the hospital, whatever medical things they will bring, like he would go downstairs to where the nurses and doctors were. And he would just be taken care of. Like he wouldn't have to worry about like, oh, I need to go there, I need to go here. Everything was provided there. I would say that the homeless population in Minnesota, compared to what I saw in Nebraska, compared to what I've seen in Nashville, even compared to what I've seen in Texas, it's very different. It's very, very different. I'm not sure about California. I've only been there a couple of times. But do they receive general assistance there?
I don't know. And I don't think so. Not the way
Okay.
that, you're describing. I highly doubt it.
That is seriously why we had such an influx of people coming in,
Yeah.
because they knew that no matter what, if you were living in a shelter, we signed you up and you gotta from the state or whatever, they gave you a monthly check.
And you had to be living in the shelter to receive that check?
Mm-hmm. You have to be living in the shelter or moving out of the shelter into a housing facility where you got that $250, but most of it went to their rent for like a voucher rent. So then you will leave, like at the end of the month, you'll have like maybe 80 something dollars. But then by then, you living in your own place, you were connected with the food boxes, connected with all the other resources that you need. So a lot of their stuff was taken care of.
How many people did this shelter hold?
A lot. Because upstairs, so the shelter was women's floor, men's floor. They had the emergency housing one where individuals came at night and left in the morning. And then when we had, like when it was cold, like really like below zero and stuff, where individuals could not sleep outside because it was so bad, they will open up the church, because the center, it was connected to the church. And they would just have people coming in. So, I mean, the place could hold more than 1,000 people. It was a lot.
Really?
Yeah, it was a lot. They would put individuals on the floor. They had mats or blankets. So they just housed a lot of people. They did, I mean, I loved working for them. They were amazing. They really were about the mission to take care of those that need it.
Okay, so you said you worked with ages 16 to 88. What was like the biggest differences that you saw within the age range? Because I'm sure like maybe the younger kids were more eager to kind of get on their feet, or this is my assumption, to get on their feet, or maybe they were a little more into drugs than the older individuals. Like what were the big differences that you saw between the age differences?
The younger kids that came were just eager to get their checks. They wanted to get their checks so that they can go out and party and just have a good time. There were a couple of the young kids who were making some bad decisions, just like normal. But they were the OG, that's how they call themselves in the shelter, the OG team. Whenever they saw a kid that was acting bad or like, we're not making wise choices, they will pull them aside and have a conversation with them. And even the staff will have them like, yo, like, this is not a smart idea. And so, but the older generation, I mean, there were some that were the same issues. I met a couple of individuals there that were old, like leaders of gangs from Chicago and stuff, or like people from down south who used to do a lot of things for certain groups. And just to hear their story and to just be like, you know, I used to be like that kid. I just don't want to be like that kid no more.
Did you find any trends on how everyone like became homeless? Like when you were hearing these stories, did you find any trends?
Yes. Mostly drugs and alcohol, losing their jobs, not having enough assistance in their city or in their state to support individuals who were veterans, and then also the individuals who came out of prison. You know, that was a large one. Individuals that came out of prison and trying to go through the whole rehabilitation process, and it being hard because there was no jobs, there was no place that will take them, and that was a large population, especially that came from Chicago. Because in Minnesota, they were housing for individuals who were sex offenders, you know, that were receiving the general assistance. So a lot of them that were not able to get housing in other states were able to get housing in Minnesota and get support. So it ranged in the trend, but mostly it was, you know, losing the job and then coming out of prison and not being able to find support.
Why do you think Minnesota's government is so, why do you think it's so important for them to help out like that community compared to like other states?
It's an initiative called End Homelessness. And so I know that Minnesota has updated and changed since then, but there's still nurses and practitioners and individuals dedicated to ending homelessness because there is a certain amount of funding for it.
Yeah. What do you think is like the primary, or do you think there's like a primary factor that has to be met in order to end homelessness?
I think homelessness, to end it, I would say housing, but also funding, like giving them some type of like financial support. Because unfortunately, even though a lot of them were given the option to apply for like Social Security or SSDI, because some of them did have disabilities and stuff like that, many of them were not approved, and so they were just receiving the GA, general assistance, but they were in need of so much more because they did have disabilities, but because of their background, it was a whole thing. But I think that housing and funding are a huge thing that would end homelessness. But again, even with that, many of them chose the shelter. I mean, and and I didn't understand why. I'm like, no, but you have this housing now. You're good. But they're like, Miss London, this is home for me. You don't understand. I'm okay here. I have a family here. I have people that I can talk to. I'm not alone here, you know. And I had to accept that not everybody wants that housing. Even when you're wanting to give them the opportunity to have home and funding and everything, the mental state that a lot of them are on, because poverty and just homelessness can do a lot on someone's mind. They're not ready.
Yeah.
And so I think that when individuals are wanting to end homelessness, yes, housing, yes, funding, but you have to tackle the mental state. You have to tackle the trauma of it all, because if that's not tackled, you're going to have repeat offenders.
Mentally, what kind of steps do you think they needed to take to get ready to go to, to change their routine, to get out of this mindset that they're in? Because I feel like it's not a healthy mindset to be in, to consider the shelter your home, just because you're used to it, just because it's a habitual practice for you, so what do you think it takes, like, mentally for them?
I think that's a hard question to ask because everyone is so different.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the first step, I guess, that it will take is just having a more structure system.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have a better system that tackles each corner, the whole process through the every single thing, I think that will be the key to it all. You know what I mean? For example, the individual is leaving the shelter and now is moving into their own apartment. Okay, so perfect. You're moving into your apartment. We find the furniture. We help you with this. Everything is that. You have food. You're in the home. You're in the first night.
Mm-hmm.
The first week, we need to have case managers at all times. You also, a part of moving out is the requirement will be you have to do counseling for the first 6 months. I think that they should have something like that, because a lot of the individuals that I saw were all diagnosed with something. They all were diagnosed with something: anxiety, depression, schizophrenia. I mean, a lot. So I think that the system needs to be restructured to have more support in every phase. I mean, looking at the COVID now, I mean, if you really think about shelters right now with the COVID, I mean, realistically, social distancing
It's not a thing.
is not a thing. So how do you social distance in a space that is already small and filled with so many people? How do you social distance with that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where the conversation should be. Like, were we prepared for this? I mean, we as individuals, the norm, I guess, we weren't even prepared for this. So how is the homeless population prepared for this? How is the homeless shelter prepared for this? What structure was in place to deal with traumatic experiences, to deal with the psychological aspect, but also the environmental aspect? Like, what is it? What was in place? So it's just a system that needs to be revamped. It needs to.
I just read an article. It was a Canadian article about how they had this experiment where they gave homeless individuals and families a certain amount of money a month. I feel like it was like $1,200 or something around that nature. And they kind of like watched them within the next like 12 to 18 months. And what they found is that first off, people obviously don't want to be on the street. And if they're provided the proper resources, then they, can assist themselves to getting off the street. But one of the big things that I never even thought of, that they found, and it's a very simple thing. The quicker you help people get on their feet, the better off they are. Because the longer that they stay homeless, the more that builds up and the harder it gets for them to, the more the traumatic experiences build up, the more your mindset shifts to that just poverty mindset that you remain in, the more they don't see the light. Trying to help them just makes it's not impossible, but it's 10 times harder as opposed to if you caught them 5 years ago when they had just hit the streets and, they were initially struggling. And I just thought I was thinking of that while you were talking, because I just feel like even if we don't have that system where it's that structured, where we have somebody to follow up within every area, if we just hit these people as soon as they need help and stop waiting until they've been, swimming in it for however long, then it wouldn't be as bad of a problem. Yeah.
I, I completely
There are more
agree.
resources for people who, just hit the streets as opposed to those who have been on the streets for years and years. There are way more resources to help those kind of individuals. It's just
And there are, and it makes no sense to me. I feel like it should be the same type of resources for both, especially the ones that have been in shelter for so long,
mm-hmm.
because if they're in the shelter for that long, that means that there's something missing that hasn't been provided, or there's something that needs to be readjusted, um, and it's just really sad. But I like that article because I think, like, it is true. It's completely true. The mindset, the longer you're in the shelter, your mindset shifts. Like, I saw it. I
Yeah.
literally saw it. And the person becomes from the like energetic, like, no, this is just temporary, da, 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 to, this is life. Like, it is what it is. I'm just, coasting through and trying just to make it by. I mean, I'm in this situation where, I literally saw the changes of individuals because the longer they stayed in the shelter, waiting for housing, waiting for something, waiting for a job. I had individuals like literally daily go out to get jobs.
Yeah.
And every day they come back, and every day just the energy just changed to the point that they stopped going. They were just like, they're done. They were just, it takes a toll on them. And just really looking at the traumatic experience of the individual, just really looking at the mental health as a whole, it's so important, and it's often not done. That's not even the first thing that's done.
Yeah.
And I get it, because you have to meet the basic needs first.
Yeah.
I get it. But the basic needs is also the mental health. You have to meet the mental status of the person, because if they are not well and they don't understand that, yes, this is temporary, yes, something hard just happened, I get it, but we can do this together. If that is not addressed, finding housing is not going to work.
Yeah.
Finding food and stuff it doesn't matter. All these the things that we are providing, well, it doesn't really matter because the mental health aspect was not addressed first.
Yeah, but the problem is that we as a world don't consider mental health a basic resource like we do food, like we do shelter, like we do, washing up. And because of that, we don't have that resource available to provide because it's not considered a basic resource. So even if I open this shelter and I required everyone in my shelter to get counseling, it's going to be hard to find the funding for a counselor, and to find those individuals to come and do that because we as a world don't see mental health as a basic need. I think more recently, it's becoming more of a trend to take care of your mental health and to talk about things, to go to counseling, but still it's still a very taboo topic. It's still it's still not something that we consider. We don't consider it on a daily basis,
Yeah, it's really sad about that. One of the things that I opened my own organization last year to deal with preparing individuals when crisis hit. And it was interesting that in 2019, I was talking about, no, we need to be prepared. What do you do when a crisis happens? What do you do when a traumatic experience happens and that impacts the external, the internal? What do you do? And so then fast forward now to 2020, and I was just like, man, this is exactly what I was telling people,
What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is what I was telling people. I'm like, because now, even though people, you cannot turn on the TV without hearing the word trauma. They use the word trauma as like it's water.
Yeah.
But people are understanding that, yes, you're using the word, but are you funding it? Are you really talking about what it really is? So one of the things that, and I'm not trying to veer to it, but one of the things that I help in organizations that are funding or providing essential workers, right? You're funding community services, you're doing all these things, or you're a hospital, you're a clinic, whatever it is, but you have essential workers, essential professionals who are out there during this COVID-19. So they're experiencing a pandemic that is impacting their mental health. The whole mindset, it has shifted. But yet we're not impacting it, like addressing it, because the impact of it all is like, oh yeah, oh you're okay, are you okay? You know, where it's like no one really is aware how to address the trauma or mental health, right? It's still so, like you said, taboo. Like, it's like, wait, we don't really need to do this. Just like the airport and the flight attendants tell you, you have to put your life vests on first before you can even help someone else. We don't have that mindset. Mental health is taking care of yourself. Put the life vest on first to be able to help someone else.
So if you're speaking to someone in the shelter that you worked in, and you know, and they're telling you, I'm not ready, what are those steps that they need to take to get mentally well, first off, but ready as well to make their transition out of the shelter?
Self-care. Oftentimes, I would say 90% of the time, they don't know what that means. And I know that, because when we talk about self-care, it's like, what do you mean self-care? Like, you mean like manicure and pedis, like a mani-pedi stuff? I was like, no. Like, they seriously thought that that's how self-care is. Like, oh, well, yeah, women do that. No. So self-care looks like walking, you know, having good conversation with people. You know, if you don't want to do counseling, is there someone that you trust and then we can just have a conversation with? Do you trust me enough to come in and check with me every day? I literally had guys come into to my office every day. We don't have to have a long conversation. I just need to check on you. I just want to see how you're doing. And they will come in and be like, oh, hello, Miss London, I'm fine, and walk out. That's the best they could do. And at the end, we were able to have more conversation because they realized that I wanted a connection with them, whether they liked it or not. And I forced that on them because a lot of people just say, well, they're not ready, so we'll just wait until they're ready. And one of the things that I want people to know is, yes, sometimes they're not ready, but it's not that they're not ready because they don't want to, or they're not ready, you know. Sometimes they're just so used to their own pace, you know. And so showing them something different is like, I know you're in your own pace, but I'm on my own pace too. So I need to know how you are. So let's just talk. Oh, you don't want to talk? Listen, I have a whole thing I can tell you about it. Like, I could talk for days. And they would just look at me like I'm crazy. But I'm just like, no, I wanted to show them a healthy way of doing things. Like, you know, people don't force this population in a way that's healthy. They force them to do things that they're not ready for without preparing them for those things. And what I approach it as is, no, I'm going to force you to do things you don't like because I'm preparing you for the things that are going to come. I think there's ways to show individuals you care, despite the fact that they're ready or not.
For someone like me, I work with the homeless population. Let's say I'm like Lisseth, I want to house somebody right now. I have all this money. I want to house a homeless person. I want to give them a job. What would you say to me as far as just the trauma that this individual may have gone through just being homeless in itself? What are the steps that I need to take with this person to help them to get ready and to, you know, just help them get ready for this new life that I'm trying to give them?
I think remembering that this is not your life is the first one. It's not your life. So I would tell someone that is working with an individual to transition them into housing that it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about them. you have your own agenda that has nothing to do with them. Their trauma is bigger than yours.
Yeah.
You know, and your job is to help them with theirs. Your job is to treat your own in your own time. As service providers, case managers, whatever title you want to use, I'm a big advocate in being a trauma-informed advocate for yourself. If you don't know your own limitations and stuff and what triggers you may have, then you're going to put that on the people you're serving.
Yeah, I think one of our problems also is that we just want to help so bad. Yeah. You know, like when we, like, even as a social worker, like I have all these resources that I know of and I'm like, just take it. I promise it'll make your life better. Take it. But you're right. We don't consider the fact that, you know, it is their life and we have to respect that wherever they are in that, you know, time is where they are. And if they're not wanting your assistance, you can't force that on them because you think you know that it'll be better for them.
I think a lot of our approach, it's about this individualist mentality that we need to help you so that you can have your own place, so that you can have your own stuff. And one of the things that I've seen in this population is they're very collective. There is a collective mentality when people are in the shelters. It's not about me. Yes, I need to stay safe. Yes, I need to protect my stuff. But it's like, I'm around people. Like, you know, like, oh, I'm watching so-and-so stuff while they're going here. You know, like it's that mentality. And so shifting from an individualist mentality and understanding what an individualist mentality is or was to why they're now in a collective mentality and why they choose that. So when you're choosing to help an individual find housing, why are we always finding housing only for that person alone? Why can't we find housing like, hey, you're friends with this person and you guys literally go together for everything. Would you guys like to live together, have your own place, be roommates? No one asked that. No one really asked those things. It's all about this single mentality, like, you know, you have your own. And what the street teaches you is, even though you feel alone, and even though you are technically alone, you are literally surrounded by people who are in the same situation as you. And we're all trying to survive and make it.
Interesting. That's a good point. But also the world, like, we're very, we emphasize independence. You know, like it's being independent is everything. You need to be independent.
Not the world.
Not the world.
Not the world, because there are many countries who have.
The U.S.
Thank you.
A lot of emphasis on independence, and although we know and we have the knowledge that community is what we need, it's not something that we emphasize at all. Like you have to have it for yourself. Mine. We're also very selfish people, so we're always thinking of, you need to have your own, you know, because I have my own, and you're supposed to have your own because that's what the world says we're supposed to do, as opposed to, you know, build not the world, the U.S.
I was like, girl, but it's funny. It's funny you say that, because a lot of people. And I love the shift. I mean, the shift of the pandemic, yes, it's like the whole foundation of it is just heartbreaking. But one of the things that I loved about this pandemic is, in the end, it was, we're together in this. Yeah. Like, and a lot of people had a hard time understanding and grasping this mentality because the U.S. is very individualist. Yeah. Like, no, I'm very independent. What you mean that we're together in this? We're not together in this. But there was such a shift because of this pandemic that it caused so many people to realize we are literally in this together. In order to make it, we have to work together. You suffer and I suffer. We're suffering together. And so I think that this is the first time ever that I literally have seen individuals have the same mentality as third world countries, low income family members,
Yeah.
immigrant families, you know, I mean, this is what they all believe. We are in this together, no matter what we have or don't have, you know, what we have to protect or don't have, you know, enough of. We're all together in this. This is the first time that the world, see, I used the world, the world is literally on the same page.
Yeah.
We are in this together, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch, and to see the process of people trying to grasp the mentality that a lot of people already had in certain cultural groups, in current social economic groups, because we were already collectivists in certain areas, you know, and understanding that. But it's like now people are now starting to understand, like, if I'm struggling and I'm down on my luck and I'm dealing with this because I lost my job, I don't have enough food because I don't have, you know, food, and I can't go out to the churches because I'm scared to get COVID. You know, I'm singled out because, you know, I'm in a place that I'm actually could get evicted from, but because there's this protection of eviction where people can't be kicked out, I'm actually I'm still in my own home. Like, people are literally experiencing what homeless people have been experiencing for years.
Yeah, that's crazy. The whole we're in this together because of COVID, we had to work together in order to combat, you know, this virus. And I just feel like if we had that mentality when it came to everything else, the world
Yeah.
would be would be in a better place. But also we don't, because our government is not set up for that. Our government is not, we're all in this together. Our government is, I'm gonna survive and thrive while I watch you struggle.
Conversations like this is what helps.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, people were talking about mental health and trauma, like, and going back and forth conversations like this. And I mean, look at the thing now. I mean, everybody is just talking about it and like are more informed about it. And the homelessness need was very huge for a period of time. I mean, it's still huge, but it's not in the forefront as like before. But that doesn't mean the need's not there. I think that this is a great time for people working in that system to advocate for an update in the system, but also to create new implementation, new process, new assessments of what has worked, what didn't work, so that they can provide a better tool. There has to be some type of update and responsibility to demand the system to say, no, we have to change. Been a shift is not the same. So, you know, I think that that should be you. And that will be you. Go on forth and change the world, honey.
Do not put that pressure on me. No, these conversations are very enlightening though, because, you know, even we know so much, we have so much knowledge, but it's not always at the forefront of our, you know, minds. And just hearing different perspectives, and just the way different people approach things, even the most basic concepts, like make a big difference in the way, you know, you think and the way you function. And there were just a lot of things in this conversation that before this conversation, I had a lot of plans for Simpli, and I'm sitting here rethinking them now, like, that ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. But, you know, we just need to change the way we function, and, you know, ensure that it's just so important that we ensure that our service is effective for those who need it, and we're meeting their needs and not our needs or what we feel that, you know, these individuals need.
I think you're going to be great. And I love that we had this conversation. And I thank you for allowing me to come and have this conversation with you, because this was great. It really just reminded me of what I love. I mean, not all, like, I had millions of jobs, but like out of all my positions, I think that was the one that I loved the most and that I wasn't burned out in the end.
No, but
Yeah.
I thank you for having this conversation. It was definitely a different perspective that you brought to all of these conversations. I thought it was important to talk about trauma just in itself, and I definitely want to dive into it a little more, specifically about the brain functioning. I'm very interested in the brain.
Oh, don't get me
I've
started
written
on that.
um,
Oh, I
I've
love that.
written that because I've written many papers on just the brain and the prefrontal cortex and
Oh man.
how everything functions, where everything's stored, your reasoning, all of that. And so, and I know how heavy trauma correlates to the brain functioning. And
Oh
so I
man.
really want to come back and just have that conversation. So I might be texting you again.
You
Uh,
know where I'm
yeah,
at.
but thank you, and let me
Thank you.